50 years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon and light of hope to millions of black slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 161 years later, the black man still is not free. 161 years later, the life of the black man is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 161 years later, the black man lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 161 years later, the black man is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile by his own hand. He finds himself exiled into colored-only colleges, exiled into colored-only housing, exiled into colored-only jobs, exiled into homelessness, while many of the richest pay no taxes at all. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of the wrong color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the American people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us, upon demand, the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Americans' legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 2024 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hoped that the American people needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the people are granted their citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the black community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. We cannot obsess over the slavery of the past when there are more slaves now than when I was alive. It is selfish to talk about reparations for slavery you never experienced. To focus on what you want, while our brothers and sisters in other lands are in chains now, in chains in such numbers that there are more than at any other time in history, including before the Emancipation Proclamation. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as people are the victim of the unspeakable horrors of discrimination and police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of searching, cannot gain housing in the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Americans' basic mobility is from a larger ghetto to a smaller one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating the coded racism of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We cannot be satisfied as long as there are attempts in Illinois to prevent a vote and a young Democrat in New York still believes he has nothing for which to vote. No. No. We are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. In my time, I advocated for a universal basic income. The solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by implementation of a guaranteed income. This was a major point I had in my final book. This was before machines and so-called AI could do what they can do now. This was before self-driving cars. This was before a computer could make a painting. This was before a living person capable of speaking became an unnecessary ingredient in giving a speech. I understand the methods used to create this speech may upset some, may anger some. I ask that you do not let that go to waste, to harness it in a way that leads to change. Productivity has grown and grown, yet the people have not reaped the benefits of this. I think the time has come to put right that wrong. There are those who would say a universal basic income can't work in the United States, but Alaska already has a similar program. There are those who would say people won't work because of it. I ask them this: what incentivizes work? A system where you lose your benefits if you get a job, or a system where you keep your benefits even if you get a job? There are those who say the time is not here yet. I worry if we wait until the need is obvious to all, it will be too late. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Colorado, go back to Illinois, go back to Maine, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to the slums and ghettos of our cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that today on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of New York, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of income inequality, the worst of any state, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my great-great-grandchildren will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in California, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, today right down in California, little black boys and black girls will join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the grave with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Palestinians, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old black spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.